Good morning, everybody. So, today I was in the book of Job and I read two questions that God asked Job while God was reproving Job of his complaints, of his questioning why evildoers seem to go unpunished, um, and things of that matter. The questions revealed to me the very act of what I call dangerous thinking that every single one of us is guilty of, I'm sure, a time or two. At least I know I am guilty of this. And the two questions that really just kind of struck me this morning are found in Job chapter 40. The first question is is well, I just put verse 2, but I did highlight verse 1 and 2. And then the other question is in verse 8 that really struck out to me. So, verse 40, uh, I mean, chapter 40, verse 1, the Lord said to Job, will the fault finder contend with the Almighty? Let him who reproves God answer it. And then the other one that really struck me was um, the question he asked in verse 8. Will you really annul my judgment? Will you condemn me that you may be justified? And you know what? Let's just throw in verse 9 in there too, because this is kind of where, this is kind of a question that lets us know that what our place is. And verse 9 says, or do you have an arm like God, and can you thunder with a voice like his? Ouch. I mean, yeah, we, the sinners, are questioning God's motives, questioning, and we're trying to justify our actions as being the right ones over God. That is some dangerous thinking because that just leads to a whole path of nothing but pain, misery, and destruction. Um, Nobody knows better than God. God created us all. He created everything. He's omnipresent. Uh, I mean, he's timeless. He's eternal. He's our creator. How can we know more than our creator? How can we understand why he does things or allow things to happen the way that they happen when we can't even understand our own motives ourselves sometimes, or why we think the way we think sometimes? So, I mean, how presumptuous of us to think that we're going to know better than God, and that we can dismiss God's judgment or what God tells us is right and what is wrong. Very dangerous thinking. And like I said, we're all guilty of it a time or two. You know, I mean, that's our sinless, that's our, not our, that's our sinful nature. Sorry, I'm getting my tongue twisted here. That's our sinful nature. That's That's Satan's way of trying to pervert what we know is right. That's what he used uh, to deceive Adam and Eve. Did he say you were really going to die? Uh, you know, and trust me, I mean, we do it bad enough ourselves, but when Satan sees us doing it, Satan's going to twist that knife in and turn a little bit more to really get us to question God's judgment, motives, and facts and truths about who He is and what He does for us. He's, the enemy will do anything he can to help us along in our dangerous thinking that we know more and we know better than God, because Satan wants to kill and destroy us. He doesn't want us to have eternity with the Father because he doesn't have eternity with the Father. He tried to supplant God and he got casted out. You know, and so he's going to lash out and he's going to take everybody that he can with him. But the one thing that we need to try to remember is that God is just, God is righteous. God has a plan, and his plan will come to fruition no matter what we do, no matter what we say, and no matter how we react, whether it be good or bad. But the one thing that we must not ever do is question his judgment, um, to the point that we think that we know better and we know more than God does, because that's just all sorts of wrong. Now, of course, being humans and not knowing the full picture, not seeing the big picture that God has planned for us or for whoever, we're going to, we're going to question things that we see. Um, and we can pray and ask God for understanding, and He may or may not grant us. And if He doesn't grant us, the understanding, it's going to be because it's going to be for our own good. Because maybe if He allowed us to understand why He was doing what He was doing, then we may just um, not be able to handle it, or I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm just rambling at this point. You know, I just, I just know for a fact that God asked these questions to Job to allow Job to see the errors of his thinking and of his questioning of God's plans for him, and why God allowed him to do this. Because what happened was Job allowed his righteousness, um, to uh, inflate himself. Uh, Job was taking on a pious attitude, and then when Job started questioning whether or not God sees the injustice and questions why evil is allowed to go on and evildoers is allowed to flourish while the righteous, suffer. When Job starts questioning God's motives and judgments and actions, that's when God stepped in and started asking these questions to Job to open Job's eyes, that to make him realize that you don't see the big picture. And are you going to really think you know more than I do, or what's best for you other than me? It's kind of a ouch moment. These questions, if you don't fear God and you don't love God, and you're not affected by these two questions to make you go, ooh, ow, you're right, God, I'm sorry. You you are better than me. You know what's best for me. You know what's right for me. Because eventually, that's what happened. That's that's what happens with Job. The questions start, and God just kept asking more and more and more questions, questions to where Job had no answer for, or to tasks that Job could not perform. And and then finally, Job came to his senses, fell to his knees, and asked for forgiveness, and realized that he was trying to supplant God under him in thinking that he was better than God, which he wasn't, and which we aren't. So when we start questioning why God's doing what he's doing, or why God's allowing things to happen, we need to take a step back. Instead of questioning why, maybe we just pray and ask for understanding. And if we're meant to be given understanding, God will give us the understanding through the Holy Spirit. But if we're not meant to understand what was going on, or why it's happening, then, you know, he's not going to reveal it to us. And he has a reason, and the reason for whatever it is for our benefit. And we need to be satisfied with that and be thankful that God is merciful to spare us from whatever the understanding might cause to us. Because if he's withholding it, it's definitely not going to be something that's going to be good for us at all, guaranteed. So with that, I love you guys. You have a blessed day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.